Are our dreams significant? Do they have predictive value? Should we pay heed to their warnings? The Gemara seems to offer contradictory teachings on this subject, which will lead us toward two classic approaches to this important matter.
We're going to begin tonight by talking about three rabbis that lived in the end of the 1300s and the beginning of the 1400s. And each one of them has a common denominator with the other, in the sense that their life stories are similar, took a similar path. All three of these rabbis were born in Spain, and all three of these rabbis ended up in Algeria, in North Africa. Why did they leave Spain and go to Algeria? That's because in 1391 was a terrible year for the Jewish community in Spain. And as we're going to see, it's going to play a little bit of a role in the discussion that we're going to have tonight. What happened in the year 1391? The more modern word that was developed in later days was the word pogrom. But at least anachronistically, we could use that word for what happened in 1391. In many communities across Spain, there were riots, there were killings of Jews. Many were forced to convert to Christianity, and this really began the decline of Spanish Jewry. A lot of times people think about the year 1492 and the expulsion that happened that year from Portugal a few years later. But this year, 1391, 100 years earlier, was really a terrible year for the Jewish people. A lot of prominent people were killed. A lot of people were forced to flee. And that's why these three rabbis left Spain and went to North Africa. First up that we're going to be mentioning is Rabbi Amram Ephrasi. Rabbi Amram Ephrasi is a known rabbi from that generation. He did not write any Sfarim, but he corresponded with some of the great sages of that day, and therefore his name appears in numerous Sfarim. And he lived in Oran, which is a city in Algeria, and he sent a question to another prominent Rav who had a similar biography, who's known as Reb Shimon ben Tzemach Duran. Reb Shimon ben Tzemach Duran is one of the more famous Rishonim. He has a sefer of his tshuvas that's called the Tashbetz, Shal Tshuvas Tashbetz, as well as a commentary on Pirkei Avos that's known as Magen Avos. Anyway, so Rabbi Amram Ephrasi writes a question to Reb Shimon ben Tzemach Duran. He was a rabbi in the city of Algiers. The question goes like this. Reb Shimon ben Tzemach Duran is responding to the question, and he writes as follows: El Harav Rabbi Amram Ephrasi, Be'inyan Choyleim Hachaloim. There was a person in your community in Oran who had a dream. What was the nature of the dream? She'im lo yis'anu atzibur ba'oisa yoim. If the Jewish community doesn't that day engage in a communal fast, yehu menudin, the entire community will be excommunicated. There's a concept of excommunication that's done by a human court. That is as a way to apply pressure on a human being, because we want him to avoid a certain behavior, so we're going to excommunicate that person. Fine. Then there's a concept of a heavenly excommunication. The Gemara talks about this concept that you can, so to speak, be excommunicated from Hashem. Menuda l'shamayim. This person's dream was that if the whole community doesn't fast, we are all going to be excommunicated from Hashem. V'hoira hamoira, so the rabbi who was there gave a psak din. What was his ruling? Ki chayovim lehis anois tainis sibur. That indeed we're going to follow this person's dream, and the whole community is going to do a tainis sibur. Tainis sibur means not only everyone's fasting. However, v'kavu bracha b'tfilas mincha. That also means that they took out the Sefer Torah, they read Vayechal, they said Anenu, kavu bracha b'tfilas mincha. They said the Anenu, that extra bracha that we only say on a fast. Why? All because of the dream. Rabbi Amram Ephrasi lives in Oran, and he's a little intrigued by this. Is it okay to engage, to follow this person because of his dream, or are we taking his dream so seriously? And so he turns to Reb Shimon ben Tzemach Duran. Sometime this happening in the early 1400s, and he's asking him, what is your thoughts on this particular question? Now, Reb Shimon ben Tzemach Duran shares the following. He writes the following: Vida, I want you to know, about 20 years ago, there was a Jew by the name of Chakun ben Abu who had a dream. Now, he gives us a little bit of a note about this Chakun ben Abu. Today, he went in the wrong direction. This probably means he converted either to Christianity or to Islam, but I don't know if we can be 100% sure. What did he have a dream? But then he was fine. And what was his dream? That the community needs to fast, not one fast, not two fasts, three fasts. Gimel Taniyos. Sheni, Chamishi, Sheni, Monday, Thursday, and Monday. Okay. Now this happened in Algiers. Who was the Rav in Algiers? The third rabbi that I said we're going to talk about. He too left from Spain because of these riots and went to live in North Africa. He's known as the Rivash. His dates are given usually as 1326 to 1408. So the Rivash was there. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Rab Sheshas, and here we see that by the time this tshuva was written, he had passed away. What did the Rivash do in that case? Chashash loy, took it seriously. The Gazar Gimel Tinius, everyone in Algiers, the entire Jewish community is now fasting 3 days. Why? Because Chakun ben Abu, which we already know later, probably converted, had this dream. Va'ataroya, and by the way, we should notice, Sha'oisa ish, this Chakun, asher Saifai Heichiach al Tchilasei, his end only showed what was really going on in the beginning. Tigamba Oisei Perek, already at that point in time, while he was still a member of the Jewish community, but his youth wasn't a spotless youth. And in other words, he had a bad reputation already then. Says Reb Shimon ben Samach Duran, and because of his dream, our teacher, the Rivash, should not have declared a ligzar tainus, should not have made a fast. Okay, why shouldn't he have? He doesn't say. He just said because of him, he shouldn't have made a fast. Let's continue. What happened? How did the community take to these three fasts? The community laughed at these fasts. They mocked the fast. The Koiden Oisam, they called them Tainis Chaloim, a dream fast. Now, Tainis Chaloim is actually a legitimate and real concept that we have in the Gemara. It's a serious thing in the Halacha we'll soon see. That's not what they were saying here. They meant it in a different way. Dream as pejorative. It's a dream fast, it's pejorative, it's not reality. That's what the community was saying. Now came Mincha time, and Mincha, they want to do Anenu, they want to do Vayechal, they want to do the Rav Torah. Uvitfilas Mincha, lo hayinu maitzim minyan kiyim b'koshi. We couldn't gather 10 Jews together to daven Mincha with the Rivash, the Helek Rivash, the great Rivash. Can't find 10 Jews to daven with him. Why? Because no one wants to join this fast. They're all against the fast. The people didn't want to accept this fast. And what happened then is that the Rivash then regretted it. The Nischaret harav zal al zeh. The Rivash then regretted it. Which then raises the interesting question. If the Rivash regretted declaring the fast, what was he thinking lechatchila? Why did he declare it lechatchila? This is a little bit of an odd thing. And as we move through the content here, hopefully this will become a little clarified. Reb Shimon ben Tzamach continues and says, V'ani oyisi misana, I did join the fast. So he was one of the people who did join. V'ayisi yomer, and he applied a Gemara. It's an interesting Gemara where one of the Tanoim says, I know that I'm not a kohen. But if my friends tell me go duchen, I'm gonna go duchen. This is one of the Tanoim said. It's a very odd statement. What do you mean? You know you're not a kohen. Your friends are telling you why you're going to go up. So there's different ways of learning this. For example, the Meiri says that it's an exaggeration. It's not literal. What's the soul of what's being said over here? The soul of what's being said over here is that if my friends in the base medrash are going in a certain direction, I follow them. I'm not going to be an outlier. I'm not going to be Pirish min hatzibur. And this is what the Tashbetz is saying. Reb Shimon ben Tzamach Duran is saying that's why he fasted. He himself didn't really believe in the fast. He agreed with the population, but because the Rivash said, we're doing a fast, so he went along with it. And so therefore, we have two questions that need to drive us tonight. Question number one is, what is the din when one person has a dream? When one person has a dream, and he says, everyone has to fast, do we take that seriously? Do we not take that seriously? That's question number one. Question number two, what was going on over here with the Rivash? That on the one hand, he took it seriously. On the other hand, people weren't willing to listen to him, and then he regretted what happened over here. So the Tashbetz now is responding to Rabbi Amram Efrasi. And what he says is like this. Let me write an essay in general about how Judaism regards dreams. Why? Because we have a problem. What's the problem? There are times when we look at the Gemara and we look at the Midrashim, we find that our rabbis took them very, very, very seriously. However, that's not the whole story. If you open the same Gemara, you could find another page of the Gemara where the rabbis didn't take the dream so seriously. So let's actually have a look at these differing Mekoides and lay it all out there and then see how we're going to reconcile it. So first, let's look at sources, classic sources in Chazal that take the dreams seriously. Number one, the Gemara in Brachos says as follows. Haroya David b'chaloim, if a person sees David HaMelech in his dream, yitzapa lachasidus, then he can look forward to piety. Why? Because David is a symbol of piety. So if you saw him in a dream, that means piety is coming to you. Next, Shloima, if you saw Shloima HaMelech in your dream, yitzapa lachachma, you should expect wisdom. Why? Because Shloima HaMelech is the personification of wisdom in Tanakh, so therefore that's what's hopefully going to happen to you. Achav, if you saw Achav is a wicked king, and wicked kings get punished, so then Yidag min apuranis, and you have to worry that something negative may happen to you. This is a small line from a very lengthy sugya in the Gemara and Brachos, where more than 70 examples are given, as if you saw X, it means Y. If you saw A, it means B. It gives a whole bunch of examples of many different objects, more than 70. So obviously this Gemara is taking dreams very, very seriously. That's number one. Number two, the Gemara in Nedarim, Daf Ches Amud Aleph says as follows, Amar Rav Yosef said, Nidou b'chaloim. If a person found that in his dream he was excommunicated, I don't know exactly what he would see, but that doesn't have to concern us. He saw something and now he's convinced he was excommunicated. He needs to sit in front of 10 people. And those 10 people have to, so to speak, absolve him of this excommunication. What's going on over here? Usually, a human excommunication doesn't need 10 people. 3 people. Why? Because 3 people is like a court, and they're good enough to get you out of your human excommunication. However, here we're afraid that it happened in a dream. If it happened in a dream, it's a message from Hashem. If it's a message from Hashem, what 3 people? You need to have 10 people. Why 10 people? The Ran explains, because 10 people, the Shekhinah is with them. So that is something that can countermand the nidui that was given by Hashem. Wow, this Gemara is definitely taking dreams very seriously. Next Gemara, the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph says as follows. Rav Yeshua bereid Rav Idi, Rav Yeshua Ikla Levei Rav Ashi visited the home of Rav Ashi. Amrule, he came to the house, they said, Litoy Mar Midi, please eat something. Amar Lahu, so Rav Yeshua said, I can't eat, but Tainis Yosifna, I am fasting today. Amrule, they said to him, don't you agree with the concept that even if you're fasting, you could break your fast and make it up on a different day? Like, what if you're fasting for some reason? No big deal. We have this teaching, break your fast now, and you'll fast a different day. Don't you agree with that? So Amar Lahu, he said, no, perhaps I agree with that, but that's not relevant here. Why is it not relevant here? Because Tainas Chalamhu, my fast that I'm fasting today is because last night I had a dream. I had a bad dream. Because I had a bad dream, therefore I'm fasting today. Per the teaching of Rava Bar Mechasya, who said that Yafet Tainis Lachaloim, that a Tainis is powerful to negate a bad dream, Ke'esh L'Na'oides, like fire and flax. I mean, the visual of fire and flax, like tearing through it and destroying it, well, guess what? When a person has a bad dream, it could be a bad omen, and it can mean that something negative may happen. Is there anything that could destroy it? Is it destiny? No, it's not destiny. It's in my hands to actually fix it. How could I fix it? What's my fire that could destroy the bad omen of the dream? When I do a fast. And Rav Chisda clarified, it has to be that day. It has to be day of the fast. So I can't push it off. So that's why I'm not eating today. Rav Yosef, and then Rav Yosef went further and said, Afilu b'Shabbos, even though on Shabbos there's a chiyuv to eat, there's kavod Shabbos, there's oinik Shabbos, and we have all those things, but because this thing is so important to you, as a person you're worried, and you want to use this tool to get rid of the bad dreams, so therefore the Chachamim came along and said that you have the right to fast on Shabbos, and this is the concept of a tainis chaloim. Another Gemara clarifies that you need to then fast another time for the sin of fasting on Shabbos. Fine. So you need to fast another time for the sin of fasting on Shabbos. But at the end of the day, you're allowed to fast on Shabbos. What is the overall feeling that you get when you read this Gemara? Is we're taking dreams very, very seriously, but not seriously enough that it's for sure going to happen, the negative thing that you saw in the dream. In fact, you have the ability to get rid of it. Fine. Still doesn't take away from the fact that we're taking dreams pretty seriously over here. By the way, on the topic of fasting, but then, I sinned because I didn't eat on Shabbos, so I need a fast for that sin. It's an interesting Maisa that's brought about the Alter Rebbe. At one time, the Alter Rebbe was having a conversation with a non-Hasidic Rav. So this non-Hasidic Rav said, why do people have to come to visit you? Hasidim, they're always traveling to the Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe said, it's very important that they hear Torah directly from me. So the other rabbi said, sounds really nice, but you should know that when they're traveling to visit you, it's bittul Torah, because they're not studying during their travel time. So the Alter Rebbe said, Bittul Torah doesn't have to happen. It doesn't need to happen. In other words, you're someone who's an organized person, they can travel in such a way where it's not going to cause Bittul Torah. So the rabbi answered, very nice in theory, but in actual fact, I'm telling you, Bittul Torah does happen. And because Bittul Torah is happening, it's not good. So the Alter Rebbe said, if Bittul Torah is happening, so then the Hasidim are going to have to do tshuva for the Bittul Torah that is caused by them coming to visit me in Liadi or Liazhin or wherever it was. So the rabbi asked back, what is the purpose of having them go to you and doing Bittul Torah? And then they need to do teshuva for the Bittul Torah. Let them just lechatchila stay home, and then there wouldn't be the Bittul Torah, and then you wouldn't have this whole problem. So the Alter Rebbe said the answer is a befedish Gemara. So the rabbi started thinking, a befedish Gemara. Where is this befedish Gemara? He couldn't figure out which Gemara it is. So the Alter Rebbe said it's this Gemara that we're alluding to now. That we say a person is allowed to fast on Shabbos. But because the person sinned and fast on Shabbos, so therefore he needs to fast during the week to make up for that. So we could come and say, just don't fast on Shabbos, and then you wouldn't have this problem, and you wouldn't have to make a fast during the week for the sin of fasting on Shabbos. What does this Gemara tell us? No. Why? Because there's a real problem. There's an underlying problem. What's the underlying problem? That I saw and I had a bad dream. And because of that, there's a real issue and I need to engage in tshuva. And that tshuva includes fasting, because fasting is the keli through which is the medium for tshuva. So I need to engage in my fast. It needs to be on that day. So therefore, I end up, so to speak, sinning and fasting on Shabbos, and then making up for that later. So too, when it comes to a chassid and a rebbe, he said. A chassid needs to be by his rebbe because of the underlying problems that is innate to human living, the struggles and the difficulties. A chassid needs that help that he has from the rebbe, whether it's in a private meeting that he has with the rebbe, or whether it is by hearing his Torah, he needs that. Similar to the person who needs to fast on Shabbos. And then, really, there should be a way of doing it where it doesn't cause Bittul Torah. But if Chas v'Shalom it causes Bittul Torah, so then it's similar to the fast that's making up for the fast. Ad kan hamaisa. The bottom line is, back to what we're talking about here, in all of these sources, we are seeing, we're taking dreams very seriously. Perhaps with one important caveat, and that's a teaching that Rashi brings in Parshas Vayeshev, and comes from the Gemara in Brachas Daf Nun Hey Amid Aleph. That Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, just as you can't have the real substance of the grain without some chaff mixed in, without some non-food elements mixed in, so you cannot have a dream without having some nonsense mixed in. How this is quoted in Parshas Vayeshev by Rashi, Yosef's dreams are legitimate, but there's some falsehood in the dream. What was the falsehood in the dream? That he saw his mother bowing to him. His mother had already passed away. So Rashi tells us this chaloim b'dvarim b'telim. Now, so what do you see here? Here, you're saying, okay, we're going to take dreams seriously, but there's always a caveat. What's the caveat? There's going to be one piece of nonsense, at minimum one piece of nonsense mixed in. But other than that, all of these sources seem to be saying, put this together, we're taking dreams very seriously. On the note of this idea of some nonsense mixed in, so the Rebbe once spoke about this, that when you read this in Parshas Vayeshev and you see Rashi telling you there's some nonsense mixed in, so a child who's reading this then faces the question, what about Parshas Vayetze? Where the Parsha begins with Vayach Elohim, there was a dream, and now in Vayeshev he learned there needs to be some nonsense mixed into every dream, so where is the nonsense in Parshas Vayetze? So the Rebbe explained that the nonsense is very apparent. What is it? The ladder. Why? Because what did he see on the ladder? He saw malachim going up and going down. Now, let's imagine you want to approach this from a very childish perspective. A childish perspective, a ladder makes no sense. Why? Because angels, from a child perspective, have wings. They're winged individuals. And you read Yeshaya, Yecheskel, that's how they're described. So in other words, we know something that has wings doesn't need a ladder. So the whole concept of a ladder makes no sense. If you want to go to a more abstract perspective, where there are no wings on angels, so then for sure you don't need a ladder for something spiritual. It's mobile without having a ladder. So therefore, the ladder that Rebbe said is the example of where we see the dvarim b'telim, is where we see the nonsense in that particular dream. There's also a story the Rebbe repeated numerous times about the Ruzhiner. That the Frierdiker Rebbe said this about the Ruzhiner. The story goes that the Ruzhiner would always ask Rashi's questions. In other words, he anticipated what Rashi was going to ask. So when they read the pasuk, he already said, hey, what about this? And then his teacher said, very good, Rashi addresses that question. When it came to the beginning of Parshas Vayetze, his teacher said, why are you not asking the question? So he said, I don't have any question. Why are you not asking the question? I don't have any question. Okay, fine, what's the question? So the teacher said, the question is, how come it says that the malachim are oilim v'yardim, going up and going down? If the place of angels are in heaven, first they should be going down, then later coming up. And Rashi indeed addresses this question. So the Rishon, as a little boy, said, I don't understand the question. We're talking about a dream. And if it's a dream, there has to be some nonsense mixed in. And so therefore, I didn't ask the question. Okay. However, as much as we have all these sources that give legitimacy to dreams, just with the caveat that there's going to be a little nonsense mixed in, we have a number of sources in Chazal that seem to throw dreams out of the window. Let's begin in the Gemara Brachas Daf Nun Hey, where it says as follows. Amar Rab Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rab Yonasan, they said as follows. Ein marin lo la'adam ela mehirhure liboy. A person is shown at night, during his dreams, nothing more than his own thoughts. And this teaching is then expressed in the following example. Amalei Kesel Rabbi Shua bar Chananya. You had Caesar, the Roman emperor, telling Rabbi Shua bar Chananya, they're in constant dialogue in the Gemara, these the Roman leaders are Rabbi Shua bar Chananya. Amrisu dechachmisu tuva. They say, or you say, that you guys are wise. So Emily, my chazina b'chalmoi. Tell me, what am I going to see in my dream tonight? Amarle, he said as follows. Chazisa dimishachri lecha parsoi. You will see that you will be captured by the Persians. The Persians were the arch nemesis of the Romans during this period of time. So this is his main enemy. Vigarbe b'cha. They will enslave you. Viraye b'cha. And they will force you to herd shakse, pigs, b'chutra didahava, with a golden staff. Okay, so he told him, what jumps out at me here in this Gemara is two things. Number one, he tapped into his greatest fears. What was the Roman emperor's greatest fear at this time? The Persians, his mortal enemy, number one. Number two, he said something to him that was just very bizarre. Herding pigs with a golden staff, that's like saying a pink elephant jumping over the moon. It just sounds really weird. So what happened as a result of tapping into someone's fear and saying something that's really bizarre? Here, kula yoima. The Caesar thought about this the entire day. And what happened? Ula'arta chaza. And that night he saw. In other words, what did Rabbi Shua ben Chananya did? He basically gave the guy the dream by forcing him to think about it, by tapping into his anxiety and his curiosity. What do you see here? What is your dream? Nothing more than your thoughts. This is diametrically opposed to everything that we're learning about till now. All of a sudden here, dreams sound like they're nothing. Next. Sanhedrin Daf Lamed Amud Aleph says as follows: a father passed away and left the Yerusha. He told the son, by the way, I left $500 in Yerusha of the coins. I don't know where he left it. I don't know where my father left the money. And then the master of the dream, we're not going to get into what this means. The Gemara, the malach in charge of the dream, who knows, whatever. And it said the person had a dream, and in the dream he heard the following: Kach v'kachein. It's $500. B'makam ploinihein, and it's in your basement. And shal meiser sheni. Oh, by the way, it's not regular money. It's meiser sheni. What does that mean? Meiser sheni is that the Torah says that there's two meisers every year. In the year 3 and year 6 of the Shemitah cycle, the second meiser is a meiser where you take your fruits, you bring it up to Yerushalayim, and you have to eat it in Yerushalayim. Sorry, not year 3 and 6. Year 1, 2, 4, and 5. That's meiser sheni. You bring the fruits to Yerushalayim. Now, what happens is, you're going to schlep 100 pounds of tomatoes to Yerushalayim, it's too difficult. So the Torah says what you do is you sell it locally, and then that money becomes Meiser Sheni, and then when you're ready, you take the money to Yerushalayim, and you buy food in Yerushalayim, and you eat it there, and if you're full, then you give it to other people that are in Yerushalayim. So this money you can't use for anything. This money you have to take to Yerushalayim and spend it there on food. So the dream said that this money is in a certain amount, the exact amount he was looking for, and he found it, he located it, but the dream says that it's Meiser Sheni, which means you can't use it for construction at home, you can't use it to go on a vacation, you have to use it in this very, very limited way. This in fact happened. They came to the rabbis, he wanted to know if he could use this money to spend it on vacation, and the rabbi said he could. The dream said it's Meiser Sheni. Dreams don't matter. Dreams don't matter. Not this way, not that way, not l'chumra, not l'kula. Doesn't matter. We don't care about dreams. Loy ma'ilin v'loy ma'idin. This is even though this dream has proven accurate. Even though the dream proven accurate because it knew exactly where the money was. Aval b'kein, we throw the dream out. Another example. Gittin daf nun beis amud aleph. Hahu apotropos tahava b'shvevusei derameir. You had an apotropos and an administrator. What happens is when there's Yisomim, they pass away, the father passes away, we need someone to look out for the needs, a custodian, so to speak, to look out for the needs of the Yasim, and he administers their finances. So he lived in the neighborhood of Rab Meir. He was selling the land of the Yisraelim to buy slaves. Now this is a big no-no. If you're an administrator of someone's estate, the Gemara in fact says you're not allowed to do that. Administrator of the estate, you have to have the best interest in mind of your clients. It's never in the best interest of them to sell land, real estate for slaves. Slaves, they get old, they get tired, they get lazy, they run away, they die. Real estate is real estate. So Chacham made a takana, you're not allowed to do this. Well, guess what? This administrator was doing it. Rameir said, you're not allowed to do it, you got to stop you. He wanted to get involved. Rameir had a dream. What did the dream say? I want to destroy, and you want to build. In other words, the dream was saying, it's divine plan that these Yisraelim should lose this real estate. So that's a divine plan, and you're getting involved. Rameir didn't care. Amar, he said, dreams do not matter. So now the question becomes, here we saw a number of sources that were giving credence to dreams. Here we saw a number of sources that are basically saying dreams are nonsense. How are we supposed to reconcile this? So there could have been an answer that would go like this. It's a machloikas. You could say it's a machloikas. And you say that in fact, if you the names are not the same individuals. The Tanoim and Amoraim who are quoted in the first batch of teachings are not the same Tanoim and Amoraim who are quoted in the second batch of teachings. And so maybe it's just a debate all the way back to the Talmudic times. In fact, some people do want to explore this possibility. Also went so far as to say, and maybe you go back to Yosef and the brothers and say this was a debate between Yosef and his brothers. Yosef took his dreams seriously because he held like the first view, and the brothers disregarded the dreams because they held like the second view. However, it's very difficult to say this. First of all, we have a general rule that we rather reconcile than to say that there's a dispute. So if there is a way to reconcile, then that's preferable, number one. Number two, in halacha, if you open the Shulchan Aruch, you have both of these. On the one hand, you have the din of the Meiser Sheni, the Rambam quotes his din of the Meiser Sheni, that it's not Meiser Sheni, disregard. On the other hand, you have the law about nidui, that if a person is put into nidui, he needs to do something about it. So it's not really the perfect answer to say that there is a machlokes. And so therefore, we have to come to try to reconcile these two. So the truth is that if you go back to the Gemara, already the Gemara starts this reconciliation process. Because the Gemara has the following question. The Gemara says like this, Rava asked the following question. Instead of asking it on all of the teachings that we had, he looked back to Psukim. And he quotes two Psukim, and these Psukim lead us to opposite conclusions. One pasuk says, the dream is the vehicle by which God speaks to the prophet. This is a pasuk in Sefer Bamidbar. On the other hand, you have a pasuk in Zechariah that says, hashav yedaberu, implying that there is a link between dreams and falsehoods. So he's asking a question. How do you have both at the same time? One pasuk giving credence to dreams, and the other speaking of it as falsehood. And for Rava loy kasha, it's not a question. Kan al yedei malach, kan al yedei shade. It all depends. There's two types of dreams. One type of dream is where the person is informed information by a malach. That's a legitimate dream. That's a prophetic dream. That's a dream that you would give credence to. Then there's a dream where a person hears information from a shade, from a demon. And when you hear information from a shade and a demon, that is where we say it is nonsense. Okay. Now the Tashbates, now remember, we're dealing with a tshuva from Rav Shimon ben Tzemach Duran. So he quotes all these sources. And then he goes on to say, let me tell you what this means. Okay, now he was from the school that felt free, and this comes up so often in these classes, he felt very free to understand Gemaras, especially the Agadata Gemara, in metaphoric way. And so he does that here. He says, I'll tell you what a shade here means. Shade, what does a shade mean? So he doesn't want to go literal with demons. So for him, what he does with a shade is he says a shade here is a reference to, shade means robs. Shoded means to rob. So it talks about when you're in a real negative mood, when you're in a bad mood, when you're in a bad place, something is wrong within your soul, and as a result of that, you get robbed of your normalcy, so to speak. You get robbed of being of feeling right and feeling straight. And so he says that's what it means over here. And he goes on to say that basically you have, when your imagination is healthy, then a malach can connect to your imagination, and those are good dreams. You have when your imagination is unhealthy, so then a malach can't connect, And so therefore you end up having the negative dreams. Of course, this is Hayar and other sources look at this Gemara and take it literally. That no, there's this concept of evil spirits, of Tumah, that attach themselves to the person, and that's where the false dreams are coming from there. The good dreams are coming from the Malach. However, this leaves us with a problem. Why? The problem is like this, that how am I supposed to know when I wake up in the morning, where did my dream come from? So in one way, we reconciled the problem, but in another, we didn't. In other words, yeah, if it comes from a malach, thumbs up. If it comes from a shade, thumbs down. But how am I supposed to know where it's coming from? So this leads us to the Tashbeitz's big chiddush. This is how he develops this point. Go to number 13. He goes, the bottom line is, Anachnu mesupakim bezeh hachaloim. Anytime a person has a dream, we are in a doubt, imu tzoydek or you bilti tzoydek. Anytime someone has a dream, we don't know. We don't know if it's legitimate or if it's not. Now, so how do we handle that? V'yaduahu, it is well known, ki b'chol davar shebemamayin, when it comes to monetary matters, yesh lanu lahamid hamamayin shenafal bayasafek bechaskasei. So when there is a doubt about this money, does the money belong to Ruvain? Does it belong to Shimon? When we don't know, we say, where is it right now? Who has the default ownership claim? Let's just leave it there. This is a constant refrain in the Gemara. That's why the Gemara says about this person who wanted the money and the dream told him that it's Meiser Sheni. He doesn't have to rely on the dream. The money should retain its default status exactly as it was before. Because remember, this guy was told by his father, there's $500. The father didn't say anything about it being Meiser Sheni, something a father would normally tell his child. In other words, therefore, the money has a chazaka of being non-Meiser Sheni money. And so therefore, we never know if a dream is coming from a demon or an angel. We never know if it's good or not. So what do? I don't know if this dream was legitimate or not. So what do? You leave the money at at the status where it was before today. Where was it before today? It was in a status of non-Meiser Sheni, and therefore it retains that status. It cannot do anything to get the money out. Now, are you going to say, one second, here l'choira, you have evidence that it's coming from the Malach. What's the evidence? Because the dream is true. It actually pointed out the right number of bills or coins, and it pointed out the exact location. So l'chayre, here you have evidence that it's coming from a good place. Well, the answer is, not necessarily. That may just be a happenstance. That may not necessarily be that it actually came from that source. Or, if you want to go further, you could say, maybe you're going to say it did come from a malach. But every dream we know has dvarim b'teilim. Maybe that's the dvarim b'teilim. In fact, the amount can't be the dvarim b'teilim. The location can't be the Dvarim B'Teilim because those were right. So if there's something that's going to be the Dvarim B'Teilim, it's going to be this. Okay, so this is a little extra commentary into what the Tashbetz is saying over here. Then he goes on to say the same thing with the case of the Apotropos. Remember, what happened in the case of the Apotropos? The din is you're not allowed to sell. If you're an administrator for an estate for orphans, you're not allowed to sell real estate to buy slaves. This guy is going against the din. I don't care. I'm not using dreams to go against the din. If the din says no, you don't use dreams to go against the din. So really what we're learning from here is two principles. You're not going to use a dream to change the status of money. You're not going to use a dream to change a din. Why? Because you never really know if the dream is accurate or not. And so therefore, we just retain those default statuses. On the other hand, when a person is excommunicated in a dream, so now like this. If it's through an angel, then this person is excommunicated. If it came from the non-legitimate sources, then it's not an excommunication. This means that means it's in doubt whether this person is in nidoy or not. So then how do we treat this? This is an instance of a safek isura. This is not safek mamain. This is not safek mamain. This is a safek. Is this person allowed to engage in certain behaviors or not? Namely, someone's in nidoy is not allowed to take a haircut. Someone's in nidoy is not allowed to go to the merchatz. Someone's in nidoy is not allowed to be in the presence of other people within their dalet amas. So here we have a shaila. Is it mutter to do these things or not? So what happens? Well, he says like this. Anytime you have a shaila and a suffix and a din. So what do? You have to play it safe. You have to play it safe. So what does it mean you have to play it safe? So the classical example of this is, you rent a house on Erev Pesach. Okay, you don't know. Did the guy do bdikas chametz or not? So you could say, well, I can rely on the fact that he's a Jew. He's a good Jew. You're done. So the Rishonim say, no, you need to call and ask. Why? Because you're able to. You're able. So go that extra step. And what do you lose? A phone call. You lost nothing. So I say here with Nidui, what do you lose? Or what do you have to lose? Nothing. Bring 3 Jews together and be matter your Nidui. You have an easy takana that you're able to do. After all, it could be it's true. We don't know for sure. So therefore you do it. So in the other cases, we said, we're not transferring because of a dream, because of the doubt. We're not doing that. Din, we're not changing a din because of the doubt. We can't do that. Play it safe and go and call 3 people and be matter. You need to go ahead because that's an easy step you could do, and then we avoid the possibility that maybe you engage in an isser. This is the aside that the Tashbetz gives in his tshuva. So in other words, rather than looking for a debate and a dispute, he reconciles all of these sources. Okay, now he comes back to this case. What was our case? Our case was someone in the city of Oran had a dream that the entire community needs to fast, and if they don't fast, they're going to be excommunicated. So on the one hand, you could say, well, what's the big deal over here, right? Just go ahead and fast. No, there's 2 issues that he brings up. Issue number 1, we never had a Talmudic source taking seriously the idea of Ruvain had a dream that now becomes binding on other people. We just didn't see a source for that. In other words, our attitude has been, well, if you have nothing to lose, it's not causing damage anyway, so then you take the dream seriously. That's pretty much been the attitude. And by the way, that's also the attitude with the Tainis Chaloim. What's a Tainis Chaloim? I had a dream, it sounded like a bad omen, I'm worried, let me engage in Shuvah today. Why not? What's the worst that's going to happen? So you didn't have Kiddush and Challah on Shabbos. Okay, no, to say that that's the type of thing that we're happy to negotiate on, and we're willing to say that that's okay. Fine. So that's with the fast. But over here you're making not yourself fast. You're making a whole other community fast. Do you have evidence in the Gemara that would say that we're going to take a fast seriously, that you're going to cause, so to speak, this pain for an entire community? That's number 1. Number 2, there is an issue of Isser here. What's the issue? What's the issue? If you're making a Tainis Sibur, so then you're making perhaps a bracha levatala, because you're adding a bracha of Shemei Tefillah into the Shemona Esrei. So if you're adding it into an existing bracha the way we do it in the Shtil Shemona Esrei, that's not a problem. You're allowed to add lines into the Shemona Esrei. But when the Chazan does Chazaras Hashatz, the repetition, and there he adds a bracha, that's, it only is a few lines. But we know Halacha takes the idea of adding a bracha very, very seriously. Is that allowed? And so for these 2 reasons, he's really hesitant to say that this should be okay. And in fact, there's a little bit of an inclination to say that it's not okay. He then continues and says, however, I want to tell you that there is one Gemara that maybe could back it up. We're not going to get into that Gemara. Maybe could back it up, so at least it's a limud schos that if the community did do it, not the end of the world. Okay, and that's where he quotes this Rivash, the story of the Rivash, where the Rivash said, what did the Rivash say? That the case with the Rivash was very similar. Someone made a fast and he went ahead and declared the fast. Why did the Rivash declare the fast? The Chayra, if the evidence is kind of leading in the direction that he shouldn't have done it, why? And the Rivash himself regretted it. So what happened? Why did the Rivash Taka declare the fast? And here the Tashbetz says an amazing thing about the Rivash, who was older than him. Look at the second paragraph of 14. Why did the Rivash take it seriously? If the best is a limud schos, in such case, for these 2 reasons. Again, you're mitzayer a whole community, number 1. Number 2, you're adding brachas. Difficult. So then why did the Rivash do it? Because he told us. The Rivash was their Rebbe. And he said, Ki beValencia ir moladetoi. He was the Rav in 1391 in Valencia, city in Spain. And before the Gzeira of 1391, a Yid knocked on his door and told him, and the Yid's name was Shloime Matish, and he said, you have to Rivash, you have to make a fast. Why? This Shloime Matish had a dream in which he saw a huge conflagration, a huge fire in the house of the Rivash. However, the Rivash said, get out of here. Why? You had a dream? Fine. You want to make a Tainis Chalam? Fine. Nidoi, we want to get you out of a Nidoi. Also, all these things we're not really losing much. to make an entire communal fast because of this, to be mitzvah an entire community, out of here. We don't find evidence enough of that in the Gemara. Alachas kama v'kama, if you want to add a bracha to Shemona Esrei, forget it. Okay, but then what happened? 1391 happened, and the riots happened, and the entire Jewish community in Spain went up in flames, and the Rivash had to run away. V'nischaret al zeh, and the Rivash himself had charata b'roisai seeing kivah hachaloim b'roivin, and he saw that this dream actually happened, and that's why the trauma was with him. And so that's why a few years later, when he's the Rav in Algeria, and the person comes to him, what was his name? Chakun ben Abu, comes and says, I had a dream. Everyone has to do 3 days. And although, again, halacha would seem to indicate in the other direction that you shouldn't take that dream seriously, nonetheless, because of the trauma of the past, he leaned on it and he took it seriously, but then he regretted it. He regretted it because no one in the community took it seriously, and then he realized that maybe that wasn't the best decision. Now, like this. There is an endless amount of commentary on dreams in Yiddishkeit. Rishonim, Achronim, so much has been written. But I do think it's fair to say that until we come to the 1800s, what we saw from the Tashbates is the general framework and approach, and most people fit into that general approach. People add a detail here, a caveat here, another chumrah here, another kula here, but more or less, it's this framework. Some dreams are legitimate, some dreams are illegitimate. There probably isn't really a way to know what's what, and so therefore in these matters we paskin this way, in these matters we paskin that way, and that's pretty much how it's navigated. There is no significant change in the hashkafa that I was able to identify until we come to the 1800s. And all of a sudden, there's a significant change, a very significant change that is introduced. As I'll show you, first we'll see it by the Tzemach Tzedek and the Alter Rebbe, and then correspondingly by the Aruch HaShulchan. Okay, but in order to understand this shift, we need to go to one of the poskim who lived earlier, who discussed this issue, the Taz. The Taz is an Eirach Chaim, Siman Reish Pei Ches, it's a mistake, not Reish Tzadik Ches, Reish Pei Ches, Seif Gimel, and the Taz says a very simple point. Remember earlier we learned that the Roman emperor was tricked into essentially having a dream on a certain topic? So the Taz says, hey, where does that fit into the analysis? That should fit into the framework too. And he adds it into the framework. How does he add it into the framework? He says very simple. I accept the general concept laid out by the Tashbates 100%. And so therefore, Tainas Cholam is something that we do. Because why not? You're not losing anything, and it makes you feel better, and this is your way for tshuva, so go ahead. Then he says like this. What happens if you know for sure, and we'll read it in his Lashon in a second, that you'll see that I think I'm paraphrasing this right. What happens if you know for sure that you were thinking about a pink elephant during the day between 11 o'clock and 12, and you know for sure, and then you dreamt about it later that night? In that case, there's no Tainas Cholam. Why? Because here you know for sure that it's not from a malach. Here you know for sure it's not from above. Here you know for sure it's because you were thinking about it. Right? That makes sense. It's a very, very interesting, it's a very point. And so therefore what he's doing is he's saying there's a limitation to the concept of taking it seriously. I think he would maybe say that for Nidui also. If you were thinking all day that you're being excommunicated by Hashem, so then if you dreamt about it, you're not going to take it seriously. Let's read it inside. Nida, it seems to me, says the Taz, he's writing in the 1600s, the Bechol Gavne, Shehir B'yoim, any situation where you dreamt during the day, and then you had a dream, that you thought, that you considered a topic and thought about it during the day, and then you had a dream later that night. You cannot say God showed this to you. It's only your thought that caused it. And here he quotes the story of Rabbi Shua ben Chananya and the emperor. What do we see? Sometimes it's all about your thoughts. And it's no sign from heaven whatsoever. Okay, therefore, you're not allowed to. The place can say, he means to say, in that case, you're not allowed to fast on Shabbos whatsoever. I believe this is the way to go. Okay? And the Alter Rebbe, by the way, quotes this in Shulchan Aruch. All right. This is saying a narrow point, a very, very narrow point. Let's see, however, how this gets quoted by the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Tzemach Tzedek has a tshuva where he's addressing a different issue. What's the issue? It starts off by saying, it's Eirach Chaim Siman Kuf Yud Aleph, Al Dvar HaKeri She'ir Eloi B'Yom HaKippurim. Someone had a seminal emission on Yom Kippur. The problem with that is that the Gemara says that a person who had that experience on Yom Kippur is Yidag Kol Hashana, should be worried all year that something negative is going to happen to this person. Okay, so someone had this experience, and obviously he's very, very worried, and he writes to the Tzemach Tzedek, what should I do? How can I fix this? And Tzemach Tzedek responds as follows. Befeidish Shmi Ali, I heard clearly from the Alter Rebbe, Shaloi Livchoid Mizeh, not to be afraid of this. Why? It's a clear Gemara. So he goes on to say, Ki advarim hanemorim al zeh b'Gemara, when the Gemara mentioned this thing, Hainu dafke, when is ala noshim gedolim ma'od, for great and holy people? So holy, shemitzad hirhure liboy rachik ma'od b'zeh. Mitzad your own thoughts, to have this type of a mission, impossible. You're such a holy person that it could never happen, judging by your own character and behavior and thought patterns. So then when it happens, you should worry, because ein zekiim min hashamayim hishpiu. In other words, when is it a sign from heaven? If it couldn't be from me, right? It can't be. Your act is not a sign from heaven. If I act in a certain way, that's not heaven speaking to me, that's me speaking. So if I'm a person who this is the type of thing that normally would happen to me, you can't say that it's a heavenly sign, so you can't say you should be worried. But for someone who, what? Impossible. Oh, then why did it happen? Heavenly sign. Al kain yidoy, therefore you should be worried. If you're the type of person who it's shaykh for you to have this experience, the whole Gemara isn't applicable to you. Kach, Kefel, Vishana, Vishilesh, he said this again and again and again and a third time. And in fact, he laughed at person when he saw that the person was depressed over this. Why? Because it meant this person was misunderstanding the Gemara, or this person was holding themselves to be a person that they were not. And so therefore, this was the position of the Alter Rebbe. So far, everything that we learned has nothing to do with our topic tonight. And if it would have ended here, it wouldn't be part of the shir. However, the Tzemach Tzedek continued and wrote as follows. And the words of the Alter Rebbe, I don't need to bring rayas for them. I don't need to support it. Im kol zeh, you should know, Hein hadvarim mefurashim beturei zav ba'oira chayim simin reish peichasiv katan gimel. This is the Taz, the doim mamish lenidoin zeh, which is exactly what we're talking about over here. The Tzemach Tzedek makes a tzushtel. He says that what the Alter Rebbe said is the same thing the Taz said. Hold on a second. That's not what the Taz said. The Taz said that if I'm a person who between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock during the day, I was thinking about a pink elephant, so then comes that later that night, and I had a dream about it, so we say it didn't come from Hashem, it came from. That's not what's happening over here. The Tzemach Tzedek didn't say, do you have impure thoughts on the day of Erev Yom Kippur? That's not the discussion here. He says, what type of person are you? Are you a person that has machshava zaros, that has alien thoughts? Are you a person who's a wanderer? Does your mind wander? So if you're a holy person, so then the whole thing doesn't apply. Then it applies to you. If you're an unholy person, the whole thing doesn't apply to you. In other words, he wants us to read the Taz. The Tzemach Tzedek is telling us to read the Taz more broadly. And basically, what you do is as follows. You say, I had a dream. And that dream is perhaps a scary dream. 1 second. Are you in control of your thoughts all the time? Are you someone who does your mind wander? So your mind's wandering, so maybe you thought about it last week, maybe you thought about it a month ago, or whatever it is, so therefore it's not a sign from heaven. If you're the type of person who your mind doesn't wander, and every second your mind is under your control, so then you would say, hey, how did you have that dream? And that type of dream is the one that becomes a sign from heaven. Therefore, he finished off, said, you should be Mesiach Das, and you should be Sameach V'tuv Leiv. The Tzemach Tzedek here is basically asking us to read the Taz in a broader way, and all of a sudden now we have a new factor that gets introduced in the discussion that was not there by the Rishonim. The Rishonim did not discuss, you had a dream? What type of person are you? That's not the question they asked. In fact, we saw the Tashbates, it didn't come up at all. What type of a person you are, that didn't come up. There was no assumption that it's only for holy people. The assumption was, we're always in doubt. For everyone we're in doubt. We never really know. And so therefore, we come up with these rules of how to act when in doubt. Tzemach Tzedek introduces a new thing to the conversation. You ask a question. What's the question? What type of person you are. And if the answer to that question is, my mind wanders, then we basically say, while it is still possible that it came from a malach, but here it's so unlikely that we can't take it seriously at all. And as you're going to see in a second, he doesn't accept the concept of doing a tainas cholam. It shouldn't be done at all. There's a story that's quoted from a very reliable source from Yeshaya Alevi Horowitz, who lived from 1880 to the 1970s, and he heard from Reb Leib Tzipris. He heard from Reb Leib Sipris. Here's the following story. One time, Reb Leib was in Lubavitch together with his father, Reb Zev, and they were by the Tzemach Tzedek. And it was Friday night, and the father had a bad dream. Following the logic of the Gemara and the Poskim, he was permitted to fast a Tainis Chalam on Shabbos. He discussed it with another Chassid, and he agreed, and so therefore he made the decision to fast. After davening Shabbos morning, the Tzemach Tzedek said a long Maimer, and in the Maimer he said as follows, about Chaloimis Bizman Hazeh, because we live through a difficult Galus and difficult Tsaris, and so therefore our minds are wandering, Machshva b'nei Adam trudin, umevulbalim tamid, we're constantly, our minds are rushing here and there. Al-kain gama chaloimes muvabalim, our dreams are all messed up, ve'ein ba'em mamish, pay them no heed at all. And therefore he said, Asr lis ane shum tainis chalam b'Shabbos, and obviously the chassid hearing this, right after the chassidus that he heard, he went to make a kiddush on Shabbos Kodesh. So here we see this corresponds very much with what we saw from the Tzemach Tzedek in the Tshuva. And what's fascinating is that we find during the same century, the Aruch HaShulchan, who's from the other tradition, not from the Hasidus tradition, from the tradition that followed the Gra and his students, he wrote Aruch HaShulchan. And in his Aruch HaShulchan, he also makes this leap that when you will not find in the earlier Poskim. Look what he writes. He quotes the Gemara. Kana yedei malach, kana yedei shei. There's two types of dreams. There's the legitimate dreams that you could rely on that come from a malach. There's the ones you cannot rely on, they come from a shade. And then he goes on and explains, what does this mean? Kaloimar, ha'ish asher hu tahor, if we're dealing with a pure person, umachshavais of the Torah v'yira, and all of his thoughts are Torah based, all of his thoughts are about Yira Shamayim, so hachaloim shal ish kazeh, so when this person has a dream, vada yesh by mamish, definitely it's significant. Shamarim lo mina shamayim adei amalachim, that he's being shown from heaven through the angels. When you're dealing with simple people who are engaged in day-to-day life and the vanities of life. And then he says, by the way, what's that? The vanities of life, they are the demons. Remember, the Tashbates wanted to explain demons in a metaphoric way. Aruch HaShulchan does the same thing. Vanities of life, they rob you. They rob you of true success. And that's what the word shade means. Anyway, so their dreams, Shav Yadabru Chalamoiseyim, their dreams are all false, ve'ein bohem mamish. The Aruch HaShulchan lived 1829 to 1908. The Tzemach Tzedek passed away in the 1860s. So it's mamish to the next generation. The same thought, the same idea. Again, if you look at the Aruch HaShulchan's earlier sources, you look at the Taz, at these other Mefarshim of the Shulchan Aruch and earlier sources, you're not going to see this conversation of the type of person. This is a 19th century development, which is very interesting. And therefore, the Aruch HaShulchan says in Sif Ches, V'nachon shaloi lis'anis b'Shabbos, no fasting on Shabbos. V'af gam b'choy lein lahargo, on the weekday also you shouldn't fast. Ki zeh lo nemar rak al adam tahor, it's only for pure people. V'zolasam, otherwise ein b'hem mamish, it is nothing. Okay, now a question that's a very interesting question is fine. A tainas chalim, there never is an obligation to do it. It was always permission. So what did the Tzemach Tzedek and Aruch HaShulchan do? They said, by the way, we took away the permission. Fine. There's no big deal. So all it means, I don't have the permission anymore. What about the nidui case? The Gemara said that if someone is put in nidui, he has to get his nidui released. And this din is brought in the Shulchan Aruch. So this becomes a really interesting question that I haven't seen discussed, and definitely not at length, and I don't know if there's a definitive answer to this. What would the Aruch HaShulchan and the Tzemach Tzedek say about nidui? Would they say, follow the logic? You're not a holy person, forget about it, toss it out. Or here, at the end of the day, because it's a din in Shulchan Aruch, and it's something that you have to do, and it's not such a big deal, you get three people together, so then maybe they would say that's the type of thing that you should do. Okay, so I'm not sure, I'm going to leave that question open. So in summary, what did we see? We saw as follows. We saw the contradictions in the Gemara, so to speak, some teachings giving dreams legitimacy, others that were saying the dreams have no legitimacy. And rather than saying that it's a debate, which is an option, but rather than going in that direction, we went toward reconciliation. And the reconciliation model basically tells us that dreams come from different sources. If you want to look at, generally, you could say three different sources. There are dreams that come from angels, there are dreams that come from impure spirits, there are dreams that come from our own thoughts. Okay? If you put all those sources together, you would have from these three sources. From angels, those are reliable dreams. From demons and your own thoughts, those aren't reliable dreams. We are perpetually in doubt. We never know where the dream came from. We pasha don't know. And so therefore, halacha has to tell us how to navigate doubt. That's the model that the Rishonim basically gave us, personified by what the Tashbei said. And so therefore, it comes to change a din, we're not going to do that. To take money and change its status, we're also not going to do that. For someone to release a nitoi, well, we'll do it. To allow a tainas chalim, yeah, we'll allow a tainas chalim. To impose a fast on the community, nah, we're not going to do that. Okay, so that's pretty much why, because this is the halachic way of navigating doubt. But then we saw that in the 19th century, the Tzemach Tzedek and the Aruch HaShulchan introduced a new model. The new model basically said that if you're not from the few very, very special people who are in control of their thoughts all of the time, you basically throw out your dreams. You just can never say always, 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 because there always is a chance. As we know, Paro is not a saint, and he had dreams that were legitimate, right? So it's not like we reach a place where you're going to say that it's never going to be legitimate. I don't think the Tzemach Tzedek intend that either. But what the big change is, all of a sudden, the tainas chalim is no longer permitted on Shabbos, and it's not recommended during the week as well. Okay, what's the last part that we need to do? I want to try to give a little bit of an overview of the Rebbe's approach to this. Why? Because many people wrote their problems to the Rebbe. And so we have a long record of many different instances where people wrote to the Rebbe about dreams that they were having, sometimes night terrors, sometimes very odd things that they saw. And we see responses from the Rebbe on this. So it's really interesting. On the one hand, if you look at number 20, this is one response from the Rebbe that really represents many, many responses. We don't know what the question was, but you can judge from the answer. The ruling of our Torah is clear. The dreams are false. Even if you saw in your dream that in a certain place is a certain amount of money, and the dream tells you take it, but half give to charity, and you found it in the place and that amount of money. The Rebbe says, you take all the money yourself, and tzedakah does not have an ownership claim on even 1 cent of this. When was the Rebbe writing this type of thing? It seems that this type of response, when people were writing about dreams they were very anxious about. And the Rebbe was saying, toss it out. And there are dozens of letters of the Rebbe and minus of the Rebbe that fit this theme. Basically, the Rebbe is paraphrasing the teaching that we saw in the Gemara, a clear Gemara about Meiser Sheni, just updating it to the concept of tzedakah to make it a little more understandable. But the bottom line is many of the answers of the Rebbe fall in this category. Sometimes there is a recommendation to take on an additional mitzvah, because as we know, very often when people would write to the Rebbe about an issue that was going wrong in their life, the Rebbe would point to a mitzvah that this would be a good thing to do that could help the problem go away. So many of the answers also have that. However, despite the fact that there are many that fall into that category, there are some, I guess we'll call them the exceptions, that are a little different. Let's look at a few examples. This one comes from volume 15 of the Rebbe Zikris. About the person, his father, who is deceased, came to him in a dream and said something. We don't know what, but definitely something that was really scary. This person told his friend who wrote to the Rebbe about it. The Rebbe responds, Yavakesh mechilas aviv b'fnei asara. He should ask forgiveness of his father in front of 10 people. Al asher b'inyanei hashnas havelos, that the issues of the mourning practices and customs of the year after passing, loy kulam hayu kedaboy, they were not all as they could have been. Okay, here it's taking the dream really seriously and saying something that should be done about it. Another example. Your wife is having dreams that are plaguing her. First of all, check the mezuzahs. Ask your wife, did she not offend anyone in those days, whatever the subject of the letter was. And if there was offense to someone, then she should ask Mechila, b'fnei shloisha Yisrael, take 3 random Jews and ask Mechila on behalf of those unknown people or unidentifiable people or undiscoverable people who she may have offended. Now, when you look at, interesting here, taking the dream seriously, there's also something very concrete that can be done about it. It's not just, I had a very scary dream and now I'm just worried. There's actually a dream that has a message and there's something practical and concrete that the person could take. That may play a role in here. I'm not trying to claim that I have a full understanding of the Rebbe's Shitta when it comes to the dreams, but it's a factor to think about. One last one. Here, you had a person who basically wrote to the Rebbe that he had a dream where he was ascending from the world. He was angry at the world, at the injustice. He was angry at the injustice in the world, and he was ascending from the world. So the Rebbe responded to him as follows. We don't need messages through dreams. Because for that we have Torah. So because we have the Torah, we don't need God to communicate with us with dreams. It's unnecessary. However, when we fail to execute what Hashem wants in His Torah, so sometimes there will be a hint at this in our dream. Now, pashut, obvious. Don't interpret your dream that this is about the injustice in the world at large. Why? You can't fix that. God couldn't show you a global message because that's not in your hand. Le'idach, on the other hand, pashut, the interpretation of your dream is obvious. You're being shown, shetzarechli is angry al she'oila moi. You need to be upset that in your world, your individual life, which is totally in your behavior, is unjust. Shaloi ketayras justice shal Hashem, not in sync with God's justice. V'tzarechli is ascend, and you need to ascend lis alois miyaridazu to emerge from this descent. And how do you do this? Through chaye yom yomim b'maisa b'poil. So this was the Rebbe's interpretation of this dream. So I do think that you could sit here and I do think you could say something along the following: that if a dream means something, it means something that is in your hands, something you can do, something practical. That's when I think we are more open to the idea of, you know what, maybe this dream came from a malach, maybe I should take it seriously. If, however, it's handicapping a person, if it's, however, it's just causing fear, if it's doing something like that, that would never come from a malach. There, I think our default would be, throw it out, we're not going to take it seriously. Because let's not forget, the vast majority of our dreams, according to the Tzemach Tzedek and according to Aruch HaShulchan, the vast majority of these dreams are nothing. So maybe you could come back to Yaakov's ladder, the beginning of this week's parsha. If it heads up, then maybe you could take the dream seriously. But if it takes you down, Yarden boy, then it's not something to take seriously.